The night my mother-in-law's slap sent me to the hospital, my husband sent only a single text. Why couldn't you just let it go? You know how mom gets. You always have to make things a bigger deal than they are. She stared at the phone. The screen lit up, then went dark. The only sound in her ears was the monotonous drip from the IV bag. Her left cheek was swollen. 3 stitches throbbed at the base of her skull. When the nurse came to check her temperature, she did so as gently as possible and asked quietly, "Where's your family?" Alara didn't answer. It wasn't that she didn't have a family. It was just that in that moment, she suddenly realized that in the house she had fought so hard to keep for the last few years, there had never even been a chair left for her to sit on while she pleaded for help. It all started with a pot of beef stew. It was just past 7 p.m. and Alara was rushing home from work. The moment she stepped through the door, she smelled something burning. In the kitchen, Carol stood over the stove, scrolling through short-form videos on her phone while the stew simmered. The beef and carrots had already stuck to the bottom of the pot, and a black crust was forming around the edges. Alara dropped her bag and lunged to turn off the burner. "Carol, the bottom is burnt. Let me remake it." Carol didn't even look up from the screen. "You don't like my cooking?" "No, I'm just worried it'll give you an upset stomach." "My stomach only hurts because of you." Carol slammed her phone down on the countertop. "My son married you, and you can't even give him a child. I can't eat or sleep every day because of it, and you have the nerve to talk about my stomach?" Alara had been hearing these words for 5 years. At first, she tried to explain that they had seen doctors, that they both needed time for treatment. Then she started staying silent, simply serving the soup, setting out the pills, wiping down her mother-in-law's blood pressure cuff. Later, she couldn't even be bothered with the pain that pricked somewhere in her chest. But that day, she was bone-tired. It was the end of the month, and work was a nightmare. For lunch, she had only managed to swallow a cold pastry in the office break room, and on the way home, she'd waited in line for 40 minutes at the pharmacy to pick up her mother-in-law's blood pressure medication. Walking into the living room, she saw how her sister-in-law, Chloe, and her child had turned the sofa into a disaster zone. The child had stripped the leaves from her jade plant, a money tree she had been nurturing for 3 years, scattering them all over the floor and dumping the soil from the pot directly into her slippers. Alara crouched down, gathering the leaves, and said softly, "Sweetie, let's not touch this little tree anymore, okay? It's having a hard time growing as it is." Chloe, snacking on potato chips nearby, smirked. "Alara, it's just a plant. Why are you making such a big deal about it? You're so petty. No wonder you and Mom don't get along." Carol immediately chimed in. "Who can she get along with? She walks around all day with that sour face. Who is she trying to impress? Say one word to her. And she acts like some great martyr." Alara clenched the torn leaves in her hand. Damp earth stuck to her fingertips. She stood up and placed the bag of medicine on the dining table. "Carol, I bought the medicine. You shouldn't eat the burnt stew. I'll make you some pasta." "Don't play the Good Samaritan." Carol's voice suddenly rose. "I want to eat the stew I made myself. What right do you have to throw it out? The pot is already burnt." "So what? In tough times we ate worse than this. You're just disgusted by me. Don't think that just because you earn your little pennies, you can boss everyone around here." That day, for the first time, Alara didn't back down. "Carol, I help pay the mortgage on this condo, and I support this family too. I'm not bossing you around. I just want us to live a normal life." The word normal was like a red flag to a bull for Carol. She lunged forward and slapped Alara across the face. The sound was so sharp that even the child in the living room froze. Alara's ears rang, and a white fog clouded her vision. Before she could regain her balance, Carol shoved her hard in the chest, screaming, "How dare you talk back to me? Who do you think you are, talking back to me in my son's house?" Stumbling backward, Alara tripped over the doorway threshold. She fell straight back, her head hitting the corner of the entryway shoe cabinet with full force. In that instant, she heard Chloe's gasp, the child's cry, and her mother-in-law's sharp intake of breath. But she didn't hear anyone rush to help her. Her blood seeped through her hair, dripping onto the light gray tiles in the foyer. She had chosen those tiles herself, thinking they wouldn't show dirt easily. It turned out that bloodstains were impossible to hide on them. Carol was frightened for a second, but quickly regained her composure. "Stop pretending. I barely pushed you." Chloe stood nearby, raising and lowering her phone. "Mom, maybe we should call Julian?" Carol shot her a look. "Why? He'll come home and start feeling sorry for his little wife, and I'll be the bad guy." Alara lay on the floor. Her lips had turned white. After half a minute, she fumbled for her phone. She didn't call Julian. She dialed 911. When the ambulance arrived, the neighbor, Martha, was just returning from the grocery store. Seeing the pool of blood in the hallway, she dropped her bag in shock, and tomatoes rolled across the floor. "Carol, what happened here?" Carol's expression changed instantly, and she started slapping her thighs and wailing, "Oh, what a disaster. She just tripped and fell. I've been taking care of her all evening, and this is what she does. Oh, why does an old mother like me deserve this?" As they were placing Alara on the stretcher, she saw Martha's gaze shift from her mother-in-law's face to hers. The neighbor said nothing. She just bent down, picked up the dropped bag of medicine, and tucked it into Alara's hand. "Don't you worry, Alara," she whispered. "When you're feeling better, we'll sort all this out." At the hospital, after her wound was treated, the nurse asked for a relative's contact information. Alara gave her Julian's number. He only picked up after the third call. It was noisy in the background. The wind was howling. Men were laughing. Someone shouted, "Julian, you've got a bite." The nurse frowned. "Hello. Your wife has been injured and is hospitalized. Please come to the hospital immediately." Julian was silent for a few seconds. There was no alarm in his voice, only irritation. "How bad is it?" "A head injury. She needs to be monitored," the nurse replied. "And my mom?" Julian asked. "How is she?" The nurse glanced at Alara. Alara closed her eyes. Half an hour later, Julian still hadn't arrived. He sent only a single message. "Why couldn't you just let it go? You know how mom gets. You always have to make things a bigger deal than they are. Don't play the victim. You'll be home tomorrow. Apologize to my mother, and we'll put this behind us." The letters lined up neatly on the screen like a row of dull knives. Alara stared at them for a long time. When the nurse came to change her dressing, she saw that the patient wasn't crying. She was just very, very slowly turning her phone face down on the blanket. "Do we need to contact anyone else?" the nurse asked. Alara nodded. "Could I borrow a charger, please?" She didn't sleep that night. Her head throbbed, her left cheek ached, and her heart felt constricted. But her mind was crystal clear. She opened her notes app, pulled up her entire transaction history from her banking app, receipts from online stores, contracts for repairs, utility bills. Pulling up each file was like extracting a splinter from her own body. At 2 a.m., she wrote to Brenda, the HOA manager. "Brenda, could you open the main building door for me tomorrow morning? I need to move my things out." Brenda replied instantly. "But you're in the hospital, Martha told me. What happened?" Alara replied, "I'm fine. Please don't ask any questions for now. Tomorrow at 8 a.m. Thanks for your help." A few minutes later, Brenda sent a thumbs-up emoji and added, "Alara, I don't want to stick my nose where it doesn't belong, but what's happening at your place is completely out of line." Alara looked at the screen and smiled faintly. Over the years, in her husband's family, she had most often been told, "Don't pay attention, give in to your elders, you're the daughter-in-law." And only the HOA manager, by saying it was out of line, had made her feel like a person again. At 6:30 in the morning, just as dawn was breaking, Alara pulled the IV needle from her arm and signed the form to be discharged against medical advice. The nurse was worried, saying she was dizzy and shouldn't get up. Alara replied, "I won't make any sudden movements. I'm just going to get my life back." The nurse didn't understand, thinking the patient was delirious from the pain. But Alara knew exactly what she was saying. First, she went to an ATM to withdraw some cash. She moved slowly, waiting for the right moment. Knowing Julian would leave for work and Carol would head to the hospital, she waited until the condo was empty. Then, she met with a premium rapid packing service at the building. In under an hour, they boxed her labeled items and placed them in the hallway. She had swallowed a double dose of painkillers just to stay on her feet. A cold sweat beaded on her forehead, and several times, she had to lean against a wall to catch her breath. At 9:30, Carol showed up at the hospital. She wasn't alone. She brought Chloe, 2 friends from her senior center, and a bag of apples. The bag was pretty, but the apples inside were small and shriveled. It was clear they had been lying in her fridge for a week or two. On the way down the corridor, Carol spoke loudly. "Oh, this daughter-in-law of mine. Such a difficult character. Yesterday she was rude to me, fell down on her own, and now she's checked herself into the hospital. So dramatic. But what can I do? I'm the mother-in-law. I have to visit." Her friends nodded in agreement. Oh, Carol, you're just too soft on her. Chloe echoed. My sister-in-law is just always showing off. My brother is so tired of her. The procession reached the room. Carol deliberately raised her voice. Alara, honey, Mom is here to see you. Stop pouting. Don't make a scene in front of everyone. She pulled back the curtain. The bed was empty, the blanket neatly folded. On the bedside table was only a plastic cup, holding down a receipt for payment of hospital services. Next to it lay a dried leaf from the jade plant. The smile slid off Carol's face. Chloe instinctively looked under the pillow. Where is she? Did she run away? A nurse approached. The patient checked out this morning. Carol's voice immediately rose to a shriek. How could you let a person with an injury leave? What if something happens to her? Who will be responsible? The nurse looked at her coldly. And where were you last night when she needed her family to care for her? The question slapped Carol across the face. She turned pale, then red, and immediately redirected her anger, dialing her son's number. Julian had just woken up, his voice hoarse. Mom, what now? Your wife has disappeared, Carol paced the room. She's definitely up to something. I told you she was sneaky. This hospital stunt was just a show to spite us. Julian sighed in frustration. Where is she going to go? She has nowhere to go but our home. Go back, I'll call her. Carol was about to curse when an unknown number flashed on her screen. It was Brenda from the HOA. As soon as Carol answered, Brenda's voice hit her like a blast of icy water. Carol, you need to get home. Immediately. The mother-in-law's heart sank. Did a pipe burst? Worse. Brenda seemed to be barely restraining her anger. There's a pile of stuff outside your door. There are movers, and it's so noisy that all the neighbors have gathered. Carol's legs gave out, and she nearly collapsed onto the empty bed. What stuff? Who's moving? You'll see when you get here, Brenda cut her off. I think you'll all be speechless. Hanging up, Carol lost all her haughty demeanor. Grabbing Chloe, she rushed to the exit, muttering, She's completely lost her mind. She's decided to gut my son's condo. I'll show her. But she didn't know one thing. Some doors don't just slam shut from the outside. If a person has been propping that door up from the inside for years and then suddenly steps aside, the entire structure collapses for all to see. In the taxi, Carol urged the driver on the whole way. The driver, a man in his 40s, glanced at her in the mirror several times and finally couldn't take it anymore. Ma'am, there's a speed limit in the city. I can't fly, even if I wanted to. Carol slapped her legs in anger. The youth today are so shameless. My daughter-in-law has decided to take everything from my house. The driver grunted, turned up the radio, and said nothing more. The weather forecast was on the radio. Partly cloudy today. A great day for drying laundry. The word drying infuriated Carol even more. She remembered the silk comforter on the balcony, which Alara aired out even though the HOA forbade it. She had bought it at a New Year's sale. The mother-in-law had grumbled at the time that it was a waste of money, but in the winter, she only slept under that one. She remembered the pink enameled pot in the kitchen. She had called it tacky, but she preferred to make her homemade applesauce in it because nothing ever stuck to it. It had always seemed to her that these things were just part of her home's decor. But Brenda's words, a pile of stuff, suddenly sounded as if someone had thrown an unpaid bill in her face. Chloe sat next to her, typing furiously on her phone. Julian, get home now. Mom and I are on our way from the hospital. I think Alara hired movers. She's lost her mind. It's your family condo. Where does she think she's going? Julian didn't reply immediately. A couple of minutes later, a message came through. Be there soon. In reality, Julian was standing at a food truck near his office, buying a burrito. He had been out ice fishing until late the night before. His phone was filled with videos of fishing rods, thermoses, and his buddies laughing around a hole in the ice. The news that Alara was in the hospital seemed like a minor inconvenience. He was worried, but not enough to drop his fishing rod. He had always believed that Alara would never leave. She loved order too much. She stored winter clothes in vacuum-sealed bags. She put labels on spice jars. She even sorted his socks by shade. How could a person like that just leave everything behind? He took a bite of his burrito, but before he could even chew, Brenda called. Julian, you'd better hurry. Your wife's things are blocking half the hallway. The neighbors can't get by. Julian frowned. And Alara? Where is she? She's not here. But what she left behind speaks for itself. A jolt went through Julian's heart. When he ran up to his building, a crowd had already gathered. Martha was standing there with a carton of cottage cheese in one hand and her phone in the other, as if giving a live report from the scene. Carol and Chloe had arrived 5 minutes earlier and now stood frozen by the door. At their doorstep, in a neat row, stood 6 plastic storage bins, 2 cardboard boxes, and the pot with the jade plant, which came up to her waist. One side of the plant had been stripped by Chloe's child, but the other side remained green. Its branches were slightly askew, resembling a person who had been badly hurt, but not broken. On each container, there were neat, handwritten labels. Alara's personal clothing. Alara's premarital property. Kitchenware purchased by Alara. Alara's work documents. Family heirloom from Alara's grandmother. It seemed to Carol that these labels were staring at her like 6 cold, strange faces. Chloe was the first to explode. What does this mean? Why divide everything like this? We're a family. Why this yours and mine? Brenda stood nearby with a notepad in her hand. Chloe, please step aside. This is a severe fire code violation. I only let the movers stage the boxes here temporarily to load them. You are blocking them. Carol pushed Brenda aside. Check what? This is my son's condo. Who let you in here? A thin, tan mover looked up. Ma'am, we didn't go into the condo. The client's rapid packing team brought everything out earlier while the unit was empty. The building manager let us into the building just to transport the boxes. We're only taking what's outside. We're not touching anything inside. What client? The mother-in-law gasped, choked with anger. The mover checked his clipboard. Alara Sterling. Carol's chest heaved. Who does she think she is? She's my daughter-in-law. If she wants to move, she should have the decency to talk to me first. Martha muttered quietly from behind them. So now she needs a family council to move her own underwear? Chloe spun on her angrily. Martha immediately looked up at the ceiling. The weather is nice today. My cottage cheese is going to spoil. Julian finally pushed through the crowd. Seeing the boxes, he felt not anger, but a profound sense of absurdity. Alara had actually sorted her entire life. She hadn't screamed, smashed dishes, or begged him to settle their argument. She had just methodically cut herself out of this house, as if she were moving out of a rental. He took out his keys. His hands were shaking. When the door opened, the smell that wafted out wasn't of mess, but of absolute emptiness. The sofa was there, the TV was there, the coffee table was there, but the feeling of a living home was gone. Under the table, the woven basket that held scissors, band-aids, spare batteries, and Carol's glasses, which she was always losing, was gone. On the entryway table, the decorative tray where Julian tossed his keys every evening, without even thinking about who had put it there, had vanished. Now, the keys clattered onto the bare surface. The sound seemed deafening. The tablecloth was gone from the table, revealing old scratches. The pots of mint and spider plants that Carol always complained attracted gnats were gone from the windowsill. Only pale water rings remained. But the kitchen had changed the most. Half the pans were gone. The knife block had empty slots. The spice jars were missing. Even the spaghetti tongs had disappeared. Carol burst into the kitchen, opened a cabinet, and started screaming. How dare she? We always use these pots for the whole family. Brenda coughed from the doorway. The labels state that there are receipts and bank statements. The movers said they are only taking items whose ownership can be proven with documents. What ownership in a family? Carol shrieked hatefully. When she married my son, she became part of this family. And now she's thinking of dividing property? At these words, the neighbors in the hallway fell silent. Martha sighed as if over a burnt pot of oatmeal. Carol, it's not the 19th century, you know. Carol whipped around. Stay out of this. This is our family's business. Julian said nothing. He walked into the bedroom, pushed the door open, and froze. The half of the closet that belonged to Alara was empty. Not ransacked in a hurry, but completely clean, as if no one had ever lived there. She had even taken the hangers. All that remained were his shirts, hanging forlornly on one side, and his ties, tangled like uncared-for weeds. On the vanity, there were no creams, no hairpins, no earrings. In front of the mirror lay a single white hair tie. Maybe she left it on purpose, or maybe she just forgot it. Julian picked it up and noticed a few thin strands of her hair wound around it. A sucking void suddenly opened in his chest. It wasn't sadness, but a strange feeling, as if the power had gone out in the house, and you reach for the switch only to realize that all these years, someone else had been turning on the light for you. Chloe's shout came from the living room. Julian, there's some kind of notebook on the table. Julian walked out. In the center of the dining table lay a dark blue, wide-ruled notebook. The cover was slightly worn, the corners whitened. Attached to it was a sticky note with a single phrase. "Since you treat me like a stranger, I'll settle our accounts like one." Carol's face contorted. She reached to grab the notebook, but Julian beat her to it, placing his hand on the cover. He opened the first page. Date: 5 years ago. The second month after their wedding. Item: additional payment for the mortgage down payment, $15,000. Source: Alara's premarital savings. Second page. Item: remaining balance for renovations, $2,500. Julian's bonus was delayed. Paid by Alara. Third page. Item: caregiver services for Carol in the hospital, $850. Carol refused a stranger. Alara took 9 days of unpaid leave, plus paid for medication. Further on were small, neat entries. Payment for electricity and water bills, grocery purchases, a gold cross for Chloe's child's christening, a new washing machine for her mother-in-law, paying off Julian's credit card, bedding for visiting relatives, roof repairs at the country house. None of these amounts seemed huge on their own, but together, they wove a long, suffocating noose. Chloe, peering over her brother's shoulder, changed her expression. She saw her own name several times. Item: postnatal vitamins for Chloe, $150. Item: gold cross for the baby, $450. Item: debt from Chloe, not repaid, $50. Chloe immediately tried to slam the notebook shut. What does this mean? Why would she document everything like this? Did she ever even see us as family? Martha, who was standing in the doorway, couldn't hold back. If you borrow money and don't pay it back, it's perfectly logical for a person to write it down. Chloe's face turned blotchy red. Martha, why are you taking a stranger's side? The neighbor rolled her eyes. I'll take whatever side I want. I have eyes. Carol suddenly snatched the notebook from her son's hands and threw it angrily onto the table. This is all fake. She made it all up. She's just trying to make us look bad in front of everyone. At that second, Julian's phone buzzed. A message from Alara. No tears, no accusations. Just one photograph. It showed the hospital receipt on the bedside table and her face. The bright hospital light mercilessly illuminated the gruesome swelling on her left cheek. Below the photo was a short caption. Julian, I'm not making a scene. I'm just putting things back where they belong. Julian stared at the words. His fingers turned to stone. Carol continued to scream something, but her voice seemed distant, as if through cotton wool. Julian lifted his head and looked at this familiar and yet alien home. It turned out that, to leave, a person doesn't have to slam the door. Sometimes she just takes the spice jars, leaves an account book, and lays out on the table all the ugliness that she used to hide from your eyes. And then, an icy wind begins to blow through the walls of that house. The notebook lay open. The 3 family members stood around it, as if around a well from which smoke had suddenly started to pour. Carol was the first to recover. She grabbed the notebook and began to flip furiously through the pages. Who is she showing this to? She ate our food, lived in our house. Isn't it normal that she spent some money? Besides, my son gave her his entire salary. Why is she playing poor? Julian gave his mother a heavy look. Just yesterday, he would have nodded in agreement. He had always thought that Alara managed the money simply because she enjoyed it. Every month, he transferred part of his salary to a joint account and spent the rest on fishing, bar nights, and gear. Sometimes he even grumbled that Alara was too stingy. When he wanted to buy a third winter jacket, she would ask why he needed so many. But now, looking at this ledger, he realized for the first time that their family budget was like a leaky bucket. As soon as his money fell into it, it immediately disappeared into the voids of the mortgage, utilities, his mother's medicine, his sister's debts, all these hungry mouths that instantly devoured his contribution. And what was missing, Alara quietly added from her own pocket. She paid and stayed silent, endured and didn't complain. That's why Julian sincerely believed that the family had no financial problems, and his wife had no backbone. Chloe clutched her phone. Her voice became venomous. Julian, don't fall for this. What normal woman keeps a ledger on her husband's family? This is pure calculation. Brenda, standing at the door, couldn't resist. Chloe, she also paid the utility bills last year, by the way. You were 3 months behind. Alara transferred me the money at night, asking, Brenda, please don't post in the community chat so Carol isn't embarrassed in front of the neighbors. Carol snapped. Brenda, You're just the HOA manager. Why are you meddling in a private family matter? Brenda smirked. I'd be happy not to meddle. But when your pipe burst, when the fob for the main door was lost, when someone took your parking spot, who came running to me? Alara. I've seen Julian twice in the last year. Once he asked how to open the package locker, and the second time he asked if he could fish in the decorative pond in the courtyard. Someone in the hallway couldn't help but chuckle. Julian's face turned splotchy. He said gruffly, Brenda, that's enough. As you wish. Brenda closed her notebook. This is a fire hazard, and these containers can't stay in the hallway another minute. Either you step aside and let the movers take them right now, or you drag them back inside yourselves. But I'm warning you, they have her name on them. If you hold on to someone else's property by force, I'll call the police myself. Who would dare touch them? Carol plopped down on the floor next to the jade plant, as if defending the family jewels with her own body. Until she comes back and looks me in the eye, not a single thing will leave this building. The mover looked at his watch and sighed. Ma'am, we're paid by the hour. Martha chimed in. You're going to get quite a bill. Alara earns her money through hard work. Carol jumped up abruptly. Say one more word. Martha clutched her carton of cottage cheese to her chest. I was talking about the cottage cheese. Cottage cheese costs money too. Does my cottage cheese bother you somehow? The whole scene resembled a ridiculous market squabble. Julian suddenly felt an unbearable weight. He went out onto the balcony, wanting to smoke, but discovered that the ashtray was gone. Alara had bought it herself. She didn't like that he smoked, but she never nagged him. She just put an ashtray on the balcony and planted mint next to it, saying the scent would cover the tobacco smell. Now there was no mint, no ashtray. Only rings from the pots remained on the windowsill. The sun illuminated them like dried tears. He took out his phone and called Alara. The first time, no one answered. The second time, it went to voicemail. The third time, the call was declined. He gritted his teeth and pressed the voicemail button. Alara, stop this circus. Why are you making such a huge scene? Do you enjoy the whole building laughing at us? My mother is an elderly woman, and you're making her embarrass herself in the hallway. A few minutes later, a text reply came. Yesterday evening, when I was lying in a pool of my own blood in the hallway, she wasn't embarrassed. Julian stared at the message, feeling a lump rise in his throat. He wanted to write something, but he didn't know what. In the end, he forced out, So what do you want? Alara didn't answer again. At that time, she was in a small copy center on the other side of town. The shop was tiny. A faded sign hung above the door. Printing, copying, faxing. The owner, while printing essays for school children, kept casting sympathetic glances at Alara's swollen face. Alara sat in the corner, uploading files from her phone to a computer. Screenshots, receipts, contracts, hospital records, warranty cards. She organized each document into folders, sorting them by year. The owner poured her a glass of hot water and asked quietly, Miss, would you like some ice for that? Alara smiled. Thank you, just as soon as I'm done. It hurt when she bent over. A shooting pain went through the back of her head, and her vision darkened. But she couldn't stop. She knew this family's habits too well. Carol would cry first, Chloe would curse, and Julian would blame her. None of them would ask if she was badly hurt. They would only care about one thing, why she had made them look bad, so she needed to be one step ahead. At 11 a.m., she called a storage company and rented a small unit. At noon, she contacted her friend Kate. Kate ran a small guest house in the suburbs. Usually gentle and calm, she boiled over like a kettle when it came to defending her own. After listening to Alara, Kate said only one thing. Come over. The room is ready. Don't bring much. Just bring yourself. Sitting at the entrance of the copy center, Alara felt the tight spring in her chest loosen just a little. She had friends all these years. It was just that after getting married, she had gradually given all her time to her husband's family. Iron Julian's shirts, buy medicine for her mother-in-law, pick up her nephew, take her husband's relatives to the doctor. She was like a wet rag that this family wrung out until not a drop of her own scent remained. She opened her contacts and wrote to Brenda, Brenda, let the movers take the boxes. If anyone tries to stop them, please just document it. Don't get into a conflict. Brenda replied, Don't worry, I've got everything written down in my little notebook. And she attached a sticker of a winking cat. Alara smiled. A jolt of pain shot through her cheek, and she sucked in a sharp breath. Meanwhile, back in the hallway, the stalemate was broken by Julian himself. Looking at the growing crowd of neighbors, he squeezed out through his teeth. Let them take it. If she wants to leave, let her leave. We'll see how long she lasts. Carol clung to the boxes. Julian, You're going to let her take our things? Julian pointed to the labels. Mom, her name is on everything, and there are receipts. Do you want to sit here until night for the whole building's entertainment? Carol was taken aback. She hadn't expected her son to snap at her in front of everyone. Chloe immediately took her mother's arm. Mom, don't get worked up. So, she'll take her junk, so what? She'll have to come back anyway. Where's a woman going to live on her own? She'll struggle for a couple of days and come crawling back. These words were a lifeline for the mother-in-law. She smirked coldly. That's right. Who needs her? She has no family. 1 or 2 friends at most. She'll live on the street and find out how tough life is. Martha, hearing this, trembled her lips but said nothing. She suddenly remembered how a few days ago, late at night, Alara was taking out the trash, holding a bag of her mother-in-law's old things. Martha had asked why so late. Alara had replied with a smile, I have no time at all during the day. And that smile was as transparent as the steam rising from the last spoonful of broth. The movers carried the boxes into the elevator one by one. The last thing they took was the jade plant. Carol followed the tree with a venomous glare. She remembered how yesterday, Alara had been gathering the scattered soil and saying, It's having a hard time growing as it is. The mother-in-law felt no guilt, only disgust. Good riddance to that weed. Some money tree, nothing but losses from it. Can't even hold on to a husband, but she's counting on a plant. The elevator doors closed. Martha said quietly, Whether a tree brings money depends on whether the soil is good. Carol didn't hear her. What are you muttering about? Martha smiled. I'm saying my cottage cheese needs to go in the fridge. After lunch, a silence finally fell over the condo. But it wasn't the silence of rest. It was a deathly void. There was no one to cook in the kitchen. The rice container was empty. In the fridge, besides a dozen eggs Carol had bought just in case, a half-empty jar of pickles stood forlornly. Julian's stomach cramped with hunger. He opened a food delivery app and suddenly understood why Alara almost never used it. Because she always managed to turn the leftovers from dinner into a delicious hot noodle soup in 10 minutes. Chloe was sitting on the sofa, flipping through the blue notebook. The further she read, the more uneasy she became. Finally, she tossed it aside. Julian, be honest. Maybe she's wanted to escape from us for a long time. What normal person lives and collects evidence against their own family? Julian answered hollowly, Maybe she collected it because we never noticed how much she did for us. A silence hung in the living room. Carol immediately exploded. What are you implying? Are you blaming me? After everything I've sacrificed for you, and now you're choosing her side over your own mother's? Julian wearily rubbed the bridge of his nose. He had heard this phrase for years too. As soon as his mother said, I raised you, all laws of logic ceased to apply. Alara had to give in. Julian had to stay silent. Chloe had to agree. All conflicts in this house were ultimately covered by this phrase, like a thin sheet of paper hiding a rotting hole. But today, that sheet had been torn by Alara. At 7 p.m., Julian finally received a message from Alara. She sent a location pin. It wasn't her new address, but the address of a storage facility. Below it was a caption, My things are in storage for now. You can study the notebook at your leisure. There's a second part. A jolt went through Julian's chest. Carol, peering at the screen, turned pale. A second part? What else does she want from us? No one answered her. Outside, dusk was slowly falling. No one turned on the light in the living room. The pale rings from the flower pots on the windowsill dissolved into the darkness. It seemed that something living had left these walls forever, taking even its shadow with it. The first dinner without Alara consisted of instant noodles, or rather, half-raw noodles. Carol declared she wouldn't eat delivery food. It was all unsanitary. Julian said he would cook pasta then. Chloe claimed she was on a diet and would just have a few bites. The three of them stood in the kitchen for 10 minutes, hesitating to make the first move. In the end, Julian, with a heavy heart, turned on the stove. He poured water into a pot, turned on the gas, and was immediately distracted by 2 work messages on his phone. By the time he smelled something burning, the bottom of the pot was already black. Carol burst into the kitchen, pinching her nose. What did you do, not add water? Julian looked into the pot. At the bottom lay a clumped mass of pasta, resembling a cracked brick. I think, he mumbled uncertainly. Carol stamped her foot in despair. Look at your wife. She took all the good pots, left this piece of junk. How can anyone cook anything in a pot like this? This piece of junk was a thin aluminum pot that Carol had specially brought from her hometown last year. declaring that Alara's new pots were a waste of money. Its handle was wobbly, the bottom as thin as paper. Alara only used it to boil eggs because it was terrifying to touch. Now that Alara was gone, the pot got its chance to shine, proving with thick, acrid smoke that some things are cheap for a reason. Chloe was laughing her head off in the living room, holding her stomach. "Julian, you're not cooking pasta. You're practicing alchemy." Julian flared up. "Then you go and cook, if you're so smart." Chloe immediately fell silent. "My child is waiting for me at home. Besides, I don't know how to do all this." Carol glared at her. "Your sister-in-law is a woman too. Why did she know how?" Chloe blurted out without thinking. Well, it's not like she had anything better to do. After these words, a dead silence fell over the apartment. Nothing better to do. Alara left for work at 7:30 a.m. She came back at 7 p.m., bought groceries, cooked dinner. On weekends, she washed Carol's curtains, vacuumed the rugs, took her to the clinic. When Chloe's child had a fever at night, Alara would call a taxi and bring them fever reducer. When Julian came back from a fishing trip, dirty as a pig, she would silently soak his pants in a basin. Her free time was the pathetic scraps left over after everyone had dumped their problems on her. But this truth was too unpleasant. In Julian's family, no one wanted to admit it. In the end, they ordered pizza and sushi. Carol chewed on a piece and grumbled, "This is disgusting, all salt." Alara's beef stew at least tasted homemade. Julian froze with a slice in his hand. He remembered yesterday's burnt pot. Alara had said then, "Let me remake it," and his mother had slapped her. A dull irritation began to boil inside him. Whether at Alara or his mother, he couldn't tell. The next morning, that irritation turned into real problems. Carol decided to do laundry. Previously, the laundry basket had always miraculously emptied overnight. How often should you change the sheets? What setting for wool? How to separate colors from whites? She had never thought about it. That day, she stuffed a whole mountain of clothes into the drum and turned the washer to the hottest sanitizes cycle, proud of her independence. 2 hours later, Julian's expensive wool sweater, which had cost a pretty penny, had shrunk to the size of a child's jumper. Carol, pulling it out, was speechless herself. Chloe, who had stopped by to pick up a package, saw it and nearly fell over laughing. "Mom, did you knit a new sweater for my son?" Julian came out of the bedroom. His face turned green. "I was supposed to wear that sweater to a client meeting next week." Carol immediately threw the sweater into a basin. "Don't you dare yell at me. The clothes are too delicate. What does that have to do with me? Your wife used to handle this. Why didn't she teach me?" Julian blurted out, "She tried to teach you. You just didn't want to listen." His mother's eyes instantly turned red. "Oh, so that's how it is now. You're lecturing your own mother because of her? Is some piece of cloth more important to you than me?" Julian took a deep breath and swallowed the words that were trying to escape. He suddenly realized that every problem in this house had one single outlet. If Carol was uncomfortable, Alara was to blame. Now Alara was gone. The drain was clogged, and the dirty water was starting to drown them. In the afternoon, Chloe stopped by again. She was hoping for a free lunch and to find out if her sister-in-law had returned. Seeing only empty pizza boxes from last night on the table, she grimaced. "Julian, Alara still hasn't come back?" Julian snapped, "Why are you asking me?" Chloe pouted. "She's so cruel, though. Mom is at her age, and she just abandoned the house and left. Is that any way to act?" Carol, massaging her temples on the sofa, immediately chimed in. "She's just waiting for me to come crawling to her on my knees. In her dreams, I've never bowed my head to any daughter-in-law in my life." At that moment, the doorbell rang. But on the doorstep stood Martha with a jar of homemade pickles. "My cucumbers are perfectly pickled. I thought I'd share some with you." She peeked over Julian's shoulder. "Oh, have you not cooked today?" Carol sulked. "Who said that? We made oatmeal this morning." Martha glanced at the black pot in the sink and nodded. Yes, judging by the color, the fire was quite impressive. Chloe couldn't help but snicker. Carol shot her a death glare. Martha put the jar down and, as she was leaving, casually remarked, "By the way, Carol, someone in the building's group chat was asking yesterday if the blood on your floor has been cleaned up. The kids are scared to walk up the stairs." Carol's face elongated. "What blood? Who wrote that?" "They didn't give a name," the neighbor drawled. "Someone just posted a photo and said to be careful." Brenda, the manager, already replied that the cleaning crew took care of it. Carol frantically pulled out her phone and opened the building's group chat. Sure enough, there was a photo of the landing. The blood on the floor was pixelated, but everyone on their floor would recognize the light gray tiles by their door. Below it, someone had written, "Whose place is this? How awful." The manager, Brenda, had posted, "Everything has been cleaned. No cause for concern." Not another word. But that silence was more damning than any accusation. Carol's fingers trembled. She quickly typed, "Please, don't make assumptions. My daughter-in-law had an accident and fell. Nothing serious happened." The chat was silent for 2 minutes. Then a message from Martha appeared. "The main thing is that everyone is alive. Because yesterday, when they were carrying her out, her face was terribly swollen." Another neighbor added, "And I heard screaming yesterday. It didn't sound like an accidental fall." Blood rushed to Carol's face. "Who is slandering me? Come out and say it to my face." No one came out, but the silence in the chat felt as if dozens of eyes were looking at her with condemnation through the screen. Julian snatched the phone from her. "Mom, stop writing. You're only making it worse." "What am I supposed to be afraid of?" she shrieked. "I'm not guilty of anything." As she said it, she faltered. A person who is not guilty of anything usually doesn't scream so hysterically. After lunch, Carol decided to go to the park. She said she felt suffocated at home, and her heart ached. Julian and Chloe didn't try to stop her, but she returned in less than half an hour, blacker than a thundercloud. "Those old gossips," she threw her shoes in the corner. "They're always sharing seeds with me. But today, as soon as they saw me, they all pretended to be busy. And that Nancy even asked with fake concern, 'Oh, Carol, I heard about poor Alara. How is she doing?' And she looked at me like I was a criminal." Chloe sighed. "Mom, you should probably stay home for a while. When Alara comes back, everything will calm down." "She won't come back. So what? Am I supposed to stop living?" Carol snapped. But deep down, she knew that without Alara, everything had gone haywire. No hot food, ruined clothes, gossip in the group chat, friends turning away. For the first time in her life, it dawned on her that Alara's quiet, friendly face was the very facade that had earned her, Carol, respect in society. Alara bought her medicine, chose gifts for doctors, smoothed over conflicts with neighbors. Even the photos for social media that her mother-in-law bragged about were taken by Alara to hide her flaws. Now that facade had crumbled, and Carol found herself in a biting wind, suddenly realizing that all her authority had been built on someone else's patience. In the evening, Julian called his wife again. "This time," she answered. He was taken aback for a second, and his voice involuntarily softened. "Alara, where are you?" In the background, there was the sound of wind and a quiet splashing of water, as if someone was watering flowers. "Get to the point," Alara answered calmly. Julian frowned. "Can't you just stop this? The house is a mess. Mom isn't feeling well. Come back, and we'll discuss everything behind closed doors." Alara was silent for a few seconds. "Julian, when I was home, it wasn't a mess, not because a mess didn't happen, but because I cleaned it up every day." Something tightened in Julian's chest. "So, what do you want me to do? You know my mom's character. She's dramatic, but she doesn't mean it." Alara let out a quiet chuckle. "Well, then you take care of her. You're the one who wrote to me. Why couldn't you just let it go? You know how Mom gets. You always have to make things a bigger deal than they are." The line went dead. Julian stood on the balcony with the phone in his hand. The setting sun illuminated the empty windowsill. He suddenly noticed a streak on the glass from a cleaning cloth. Alara had a strange habit. When she was feeling down, she would scrub the windows until they sparkled. He used to laugh that she had nothing better to do. Only now did he understand. Those crystal-clear panes were where she had wiped away her resentment, layer by layer. From the living room, his mother's voice called out again, "Julian, what's for dinner?" Julian closed his eyes. For the first time, he didn't rush to obey her command, and the black, burnt pot still lay in the sink, like a silent witness to their collapse. On the third day, Brenda from the HOA sent a message to the building's group chat. "We request the owners of the third-floor unit to come to the management office at 10 a.m. We need to verify damages in the common areas, walls, floor, and review the security camera footage. A cleaning service has also been invited." The message was dry, official, without a hint of emotion. But Carol, upon reading it, broke out in a cold sweat. Julian said, "I'll go myself." Carol clung to him. "No, you're a man, you won't be able to string 2 words together. They'll eat you alive in there. I'm going with you. I want to see what this HOA thinks it's doing." She deliberately put on a burgundy cardigan, tied a silk scarf around her neck, and applied lipstick. She knew these kinds of offices too well. Assertiveness was key. The moment she shed a tear and started wailing, "I'm a poor pensioner," they would immediately back down. But walking into the HOA office, she realized she was mistaken. Brenda's office was crowded. Besides the manager herself, her neighbor Martha, and Chloe, a police officer was sitting at the table. An open report lay in front of him. Seeing the man in uniform, Carol lost half her arrogance but still tried to go on the offensive. "What is this circus? You called the police because my daughter-in-law tripped on her own? We'll handle our own family matters." The police officer stood up and gave her a stern look. "Please sit down, ma'am. Family matters end when felony assault occurs in public areas. The hospital reported Alara's traumatic brain injury, and I am here to review the security footage as evidence." Carol turned pale. She tripped over the shoe cabinet herself. "That's exactly what I am here to verify," the officer cut in coldly. He nodded to the security chief. "Play the footage from the hallway cameras." The color drained from Carol's face instantly. She had completely forgotten about the cameras in the hallway. Or rather, she was so used to being the queen of her home that she had forgotten her power ended at her doorstep. The video began. It was footage from the neighbor's smart doorbell camera across the hall. Time, 7:08 p.m. The hallway light is on. The door is open. Alara is standing at the threshold, holding onto the doorframe with one hand, a pharmacy bag in the other. Carol's scream can be heard clearly from inside the apartment. The smart doorbell's microphone recorded the sound with a slight crackle. "Don't think that just because you earn your little pennies you can boss everyone around here." Alara replies quietly. "Carol, I just said the stew was burnt." And then, on the screen, Carol flies out of the door and slaps Alara across the face. A dead silence fell over the conference room. The sound of the slap echoed off the walls. Julian turned as white as a sheet. Carol's mouth fell open. I just lost my temper. She was being sassy. I barely touched her." The video continued. Alara, holding her cheek, backs away. Carol advances on her, jabbing a finger almost in her nose. Chloe, holding her child, stands behind and doesn't even try to intervene, just steps aside. Then, Carol shoves Alara hard in the chest. Alara slips, falls backward, and her head slams into the corner of the cabinet. As she falls, the pharmacy bag flies from her hand, and pill packages scatter across the landing. The video shows Carol freezing for a second. And then, she doesn't rush to help her daughter-in-law. She bends down and kicks the pills aside with her foot, as if they are in her way. The cleaning lady gasped loudly. Martha's face darkened. Brenda paused the video. The frame froze on Alara lying on the floor. A dark spot was already spreading from under her hair, while her mother-in-law stood nearby, her foot raised for another kick at the pills. Carol flinched and jumped up. "Why are you showing this? This is an invasion of privacy." The officer cut her off harshly. "Ma'am, this is a public hallway. You claim she fell on her own. The video evidence clearly shows you shoving her." The mother-in-law's lips trembled. She turned sharply to her son. "Julian, tell them. Your mother just had a flare-up. I didn't mean it. Julian, tell them. I just lost my temper for a second. She was being disrespectful." All eyes turned to Julian. His throat was dry. "Mom, why didn't you help her?" Carol was taken aback. "I was scared to death myself when I saw the blood, and we called the ambulance afterward." Martha couldn't stand it. Alara called the ambulance herself. "It wouldn't be my business if I hadn't seen her lying there, paler than a ghost, while you stood over her screaming that she was faking it." Carol started slapping her legs, trying to elicit pity. "What have I done to deserve this? I gave my life to this boy, and in the end, everyone makes me out to be a monster." But then the security chief played a second video. Time, 8:45 p.m. The ambulance had already left. Only Carol and Chloe were on the landing. The mother-in-law was furiously scrubbing the floor with a mop, cursing. "That wretched girl. Caused me problems so late at night. When Julian gets back, I'll show him how to let his wife get out of hand. You can't spoil women. If she tries to blackmail me with the hospital, I'll tell Julian to divorce her altogether. He's my son. He'll always listen to me in the end." The video stopped. The only sound in the room was the hum of the air conditioner. Julian's face was frozen like a plaster mask. He wasn't a peacemaker, a husband. He was just a convenient club in his mother's hands. Carol panicked. She rushed towards the projector. "This is humiliating." She turned to her son. "Your wife has walked all over me. I'm trying to keep her in line for your sake, and now you're lecturing me." Julian said quietly. She's my wife, not a dog for you to keep in line. The officer closed his notepad and stood up. Well, the picture is clear. Carol, you are lucky Alara Sterling has temporarily paused pressing charges. Otherwise, I would be arresting you for assault right now. This video is now official police evidence. Do not let there be another incident. The mother-in-law sank heavily into a chair, unable to utter a word. Brenda, seizing the moment, pushed some papers towards Julian, the damage to the plaster and the bill for the cleaning. I need the owner to sign this. Where is she now? Julian asked sharply. Brenda shook her head. She didn't say. Martha sized him up and said slowly, Julian, when your wife ended up in the hospital, you were on a fishing trip, weren't you? Julian's face twisted. Brenda opened her phone. Someone in the local fishing group chat posted screenshots from social media. Pete from the next building is in it. The timestamp is 1:30 in the morning. Your wife is getting stitches, and you're in the comments writing, "Fishing heals the soul." Someone in the office couldn't help but lower their head to hide a smirk. But it wasn't joy. It was a heavy awkwardness. That kind of awkwardness hits harder than any insult. Julian stood as if his skin had been flayed off. He didn't know where to put his hands. Carol tried to cry again, but no tears came. She suddenly realized that before, the moment she played the victim, everyone would rush to console her. But today, people were just watching the end of a play whose finale had bored everyone. Her mask hadn't been ripped off by someone. It had simply rotted through. Leaving the HOA office, Carol squinted in the bright sun. It seemed to her that every passerby was staring. Nancy from the senior center was walking towards her with her dog. Carol opened her mouth to say hello, but Nancy, backing away, cut her off. Carol, my phone is ringing. I have to go. The words of apology got stuck in the mother-in-law's throat like a lump of cotton. Julian walked behind. His phone chimed. A photo from Alara. The picture was of the very same jade plant. It now stood on a sun-drenched, unfamiliar balcony. Next to it was a blue spray bottle. Drops of water glistened on the leaves, and the plant looked alive and clean, like freshly washed eyes. The caption read, "It changed its pot, so did I." Julian started bombarding her with messages. First, he tried to write in the tone of a husband. Alara, this has gone too far. It's time to cool down. Where are you? Let's talk. Alara didn't reply. The second message had a note of resentment. I admit I was wrong not to come to the hospital, but I didn't know it was that serious. You know my mom. She acts first, thinks later. Silence. In the third message, his anger broke through. You left the video with the HOA. That's going too far. Do you want my mother to be unable to walk down the street in peace? This time, Alara replied. And when she was swinging her fists, was she thinking about whether I could walk down the street in peace? Julian stared at the screen. A stone seemed to be rolling in his stomach. He wanted to accuse her of cruelty, but the images from the cameras flashed before his eyes. His wife, with whom he had shared a bed for 5 years, lying on the cold concrete. No one picked her up. No one asked how much it hurt. They even kicked her medicine away. In a fit of helplessness, he threw his phone on the sofa and clutched his head. Carol sat in her armchair with red eyes but was unwilling to surrender. Why are you even writing to her? She thinks she's a queen now. Just ignore her for a few days. She'll come running back. Julian didn't answer. He no longer believed in that mantra because on the 5th day without Alara, the apartment had finally descended into chaos. In the morning, Carol demanded oatmeal, not the instant kind, and it had to be cooked with milk, not water, with just a pinch of salt. Julian cooked it. The first time, the oatmeal burned. The second time, it was a watery, gray sludge. The third time, he managed something edible. Carol took one spoonful, grimaced, and opened her mouth to start criticizing, but she stopped herself because she saw her son. Dark circles had formed under Julian's eyes. He hadn't shaved in days and looked somehow gaunt. For the first time, it occurred to her that her son could also get tired. The thought made her uneasy. Before, she believed her son was a treasure, and the daughter-in-law should solve all the problems. Her son should rest after work. Fishing was stress relief. The fact that he couldn't cook was normal for a man. But now, looking at his exhausted face over a plate of vile porridge, she realized her love for her son was sustained entirely by the fact that another woman did all the dirty work. But she couldn't admit it. In her entire life, she had never admitted she was wrong. In the afternoon, Carol complained of dizziness and demanded to be taken to the doctor. Before, Alara would make the appointments, calculate travel time, and bring water, wipes, mints, and the medical records. All her mother-in-law had to do was get dressed and get in the taxi, and still grumble along the way that Alara was walking too slowly. This time, Julian took a half day off work. First, they stood in the wrong line at reception for 20 minutes. It turned out they needed an endocrinologist, not a cardiologist. Carol caused a scene in the middle of the lobby. What kind of mess is this hospital? When Alara brought me, we never got confused. Julian, clutching a crumpled appointment slip, hissed, "Mom, for God's sake, be quiet." His mother's eyes filled with tears. "I feel sick and you're yelling at me." The examination revealed nothing serious. The doctor said to be less stressed. On the way back, the mother-in-law moaned, "How can I not be stressed? With a daughter-in-law like that, I'll be in my grave soon." Julian was driving. His patience snapped. "Mom, you're the one who beat her so badly she ended up in the hospital." A dead silence fell in the car. Carol slowly turned her head, as if seeing her son for the first time. "Repeat what you said." Julian's lips trembled, but he remained silent. Some words only require courage the first time. To repeat them, you have to be ready for the consequences, and he was too weak. However, the crack had already formed. After lunch, Chloe dropped by. She settled comfortably on the sofa, took out Alara's crystal fruit bowl, sliced a watermelon, and began to eat, dripping juice onto the glass table. Julian, seeing this pigsty, exploded. "You're here again?" Chloe was taken aback. "I came to check on Mom, can't I? If you're here, then just sit." "Who's gonna wipe the table? Who's gonna take out the trash?" Chloe pouted. "Julian, why are you taking it out on me?" "Alara used to clean all this up in passing." Julian blurted out, "She's not your maid." At these words, all three of them froze. Chloe was the first to recover. "Oh, look at us, so proper now. Just because your wife ran away, you're taking your anger out on me. Take care of your own mother. I have my own kids, you know." She grabbed her bag and headed for the door. At the threshold, she turned around. "By the way, Mom, that back massager you asked for, I ordered it. It's $120. Julian, transfer me the money." Julian laughed bitterly. "She asked for it, you ordered it, and I have to pay?" Carol immediately defended her daughter. "Chloe is just looking out for me. What's the big deal if you, as her brother, pay for it?" Julian looked at them. It suddenly seemed to him that this family was like a dinner table. Before, Alara sat at the edge, and everyone grabbed pieces from her plate. And when she got up and left with her plate, the others suddenly realized that none of them wanted to share their own portion. In the evening, Alara finally answered Julian's call. At that moment, she was in the backyard of Kate's guest house, trimming dry branches from the bushes. The yard was small, with hydrangeas and jasmine. Retro string lights were hung along the fence. From the kitchen, Kate's voice could be heard. "Alara, should I add an egg to your pasta?" "Go for it," Alara shouted back. The phone vibrated. She looked at the screen and answered the call. Julian's voice sounded exhausted. "Alara, Mom was at the doctor today. Her blood pressure is acting up." You always knew her medication schedule. Alara paused her pruning shears for a second, then methodically snipped off a yellowed branch. "I put labels on every box. Morning, noon, evening. It's all written down." Julian was silent. "I can't find her blue folder with the test results." "The cabinet under the TV, second shelf on the left, if you haven't thrown it out." Julian clung to this like a drowning man to a straw. "See, you still care about our home." Alara laughed. The light laugh made Julian's blood run cold. "Julian, I don't care about the home. I just have a good memory. You used to use my memory so you wouldn't have to do anything yourselves. Don't you dare call that love." Silence hung on the other end of the line. Alara put down the shears and continued in a level tone. "You said your mom is old and needs to be deferred to. I deferred. I gave her back to you. What's not to like? What are you talking about? She's your mother. Her pills, her hospital visits, her tantrums, her reputation, that's all your responsibility. Aren't you the most obedient and loving son?" Julian turned pale. "You're just getting revenge." "No," Alara replied. "I'm just following your own logic and putting things back in their rightful places." She hung up. Kate came out onto the porch with a plate of pasta. Hearing the last phrase, she gave a thumbs up. "Girl, your words are more al dente than this pasta." Alara smiled and took the plate. Just pasta, an egg, a drop of oil. But swallowing the first bite, she felt a warmth spread through her stomach, and tears suddenly welled up in her eyes. She had forgotten what it was like to just sit and eat a hot meal without jumping up every 5 minutes to pour someone more soup. Back home, Julian found the blue folder in the cabinet. Inside were organized charts, statements, medication instructions, and a handwritten schedule of medication intake in neat handwriting, with little suns and moons drawn so his mother wouldn't mix up the times. Julian crumpled the paper in his hand, everything inside him churning. Carol, standing nearby, snorted coldly. Playing the caring one. If she were truly caring, she wouldn't have abandoned an old person to their fate. Julian looked up at her. Mom, do you really think she owes you something? Of course, the mother-in-law huffed. She got married, became part of the family. She lives in this house. She should pull her weight. It's only fair that she helps take care of me. And mine? You're a man. You earn money. Julian suddenly let out a nervous laugh. The money I earned wasn't enough for this family. Did you see her notebook? How much she was paying out of her own pocket? Carol faltered, but immediately went on the attack. What has she done to you? You defend her with every word. Julian looked at his mother and for the first time saw not a poor victim, but an insatiable leech. She wanted money and status from her son, slavish obedience from her daughter-in-law, flattery from her daughter, and adoration from the neighbors. She wanted everything but never once asked how others felt. Just then, the doorbell rang. A courier brought a huge box. An order for Carol, the massager. Payment on delivery, $120. Julian's face darkened. Carol's eyes darted around. Chloe said it would be good for my back. Julian looked her straight in the eye. Who's going to pay? His mother's voice trembled. Before, Alara used to pay for these things herself. A heavy silence fell in the entryway. The courier shifted from foot to foot. So, are you taking it or not? Julian looked at the box. It was a symbol of their entire life, a symbol of greed, the habit of living at someone else's expense, and his family's boundless audacity. No, he said slowly, syllable by syllable. Process a return. How dare you? Carol shrieked. The courier took a step back. Julian didn't shout. He just waved his hand wearily. Process it. The door closed behind the courier. Carol collapsed onto the sofa and this time burst into real tears. It wasn't a performance. She was genuinely scared that the buffer who had stood between her and her son for years, absorbing all his negativity, was gone. Now, between her and Julian, there was only the bare, ugly truth, which there was no one left to clean up. On the 7th day of her life at Kate's guest house, a light rain fell. The drops pattered on the wooden veranda like someone drumming their fingers on a table. The jasmine smelled even sharper after the rain. Alara woke up early, not to an alarm, but because the stitches on the back of her head ached in the damp weather. The pain was sharp but persistent, like an old thread stitched into her flesh. She sat up in bed and, out of habit, felt a jolt to go to the kitchen to check if the gas was off, if her mother-in-law's pills were laid out, if her husband's shirts were ironed. But her hand found a thermos of warm water on the bedside table, thoughtfully left by Kate. Under the thermos was a note. When you wake up, drink some water. Don't rush to be a hero in the kitchen. It won't explode. The world won't end. Rest. Alara laughed out loud, and then tears streamed down her face. So, this is what it feels like to be cared for. It wasn't grand gestures or tearful apologies on bended knee. It was simply waking up to warm water, hot food, and no one chasing you out of bed to feed the whole family. Washing her face, she looked at herself in the mirror. The swelling on her cheek had gone down. The bruise had yellowed. A shaved patch of hair was visible at the back of her head, and the gauze dressing didn't look great. She touched her hair, remembering how, in the first year of their marriage, Julian had said he liked long hair. And Carol had declared, a married woman has no business letting her hair grow long. She should be more modest. And for 5 years, Alara had worn the same bun. Not because she was forced to, but because when you're wrapped in the thin threads of criticism every day, you eventually start to believe it's your own choice. For breakfast, Kate made oatmeal and toast. Chewing on her toast, Kate scrolled through her phone and chuckled. Your mother-in-law has become the star of the neighborhood. Screenshots from the building chat are making the rounds. Everyone is being polite, but your neighbor Martha is hitting the mark every time. Kate mimicked the neighbor's voice. Oh, those quiet people. God forbid you push them too far. Alara smiled into her bowl. I love Martha. As soon as I recover, I'll definitely invite her over for dinner. She'll probably bring her pickles. And I'll need an appetizer. They both laughed, and the sound of the rain outside seemed somehow brighter. After breakfast, Alara went into the yard to repot the jade plant. For 3 years, the tree had stood in her husband's house. Carol was always grumbling that it was useless, just taking up space. Chloe's child had nearly stripped it bald, making it look utterly miserable. Kate watched the process and gave her verdict. This plant has a character as tough as yours. It'll survive. Alara sat on her haunches, carefully loosening the old soil. There were more roots than she thought. Just because they had been in a tight pot for so long, they had started to twist inward. She trimmed the rotten roots and added fresh soil. Watering the plant, she suddenly remembered an old family heirloom. Before moving to another city and leaving Alara for good, her grandmother had given her an old carved box. There was no gold in it. Inside lay an old brooch, a few faded photos, and a note. The note said, "Alara, my dear, life is not something you endure. It's something you take into your own hands." Back then, she had just gotten married and found those words too harsh. She believed that if she were compliant, domestic, and gentle, her marriage would eventually become happy. She had hidden her grandmother's note at the very bottom of her suitcase. And only now, while packing her things, did she find it again. It turned out her grandmother had known all along. Women endure not because they have nowhere to go, but because they get used to thinking of someone else's cage as their sky. After lunch, Alara opened her laptop and began to compile the second part of her calculations. The first notebook was about daily life and money spent. The second part was about the condo. This part was thinner but much heavier. The mortgaged condo was in Julian's name. This was Carol's main trump card. "It's my son's condo, so know your place," she would repeat. But the reality was more complicated. Julian's parents had paid the initial down payment, but Alara had added her own pre-marital $15,000. Half the renovations were paid for with Alara's credit card. Julian had promised at the time to pay her back in installments, but forgot. The furniture, appliances, right down to the curtains and mattress, were all bought by Alara. But most importantly, in the first year of their marriage, to reassure Alara, Julian had handwritten a promissory note and an agreement about her contributions. He had said tenderly at the time, "Alara, listen to Mom. We're one family. I won't hurt you," wrote it, and forgot. But Alara hadn't forgotten. She wasn't mercenary. She just wanted to trust paper more than words. She scanned the document, made copies, and put them in a thick envelope. She didn't plan to sue right away. She didn't want to turn her life into an endless soap opera of dividing assets. She just wanted to show them, on the last day, what their son's home was really made of. In the evening, Julian called again. Alara didn't answer. He flooded her with messages. "Mom is a complete mess. We can't manage without you. I admit, I neglected you. Come back, and we'll start with a clean slate." Alara read them and closed the chat. A clean slate sounded nice, but when men suggest starting over, they usually just want the woman to forget all the grievances, cover up the scars, and make their lives convenient again. They don't want to change. They just can't stand the domestic chaos. Late in the evening, Kate was drinking tea on the veranda and asked, "Do you still love him?" Alara was silent for a long time. The rain had stopped. Drops fell loudly from the roof into puddles. "I don't know. I only know one thing. The moment I think about going back to that condo, I can't breathe." Kate nodded. "Then don't think about love. Think about whether you'll sleep well tonight, whether you'll have a hot dinner, and whether someone will slap you for oversalting the soup." Alara smiled. The requirement seemed so trivial, but many women didn't even have that. At 11 p.m., Alara opened her phone and saw a video from Brenda. In the video, Carol was standing at the entrance of the building, gesturing wildly, trying to prove something to her neighbor Nancy. Nancy, backing away, cut her off. "Carol, my phone is ringing. I have to go." Brenda captioned it. "She's losing her status as our courtyard's prima donna." Alara laughed. After laughing, she wrote to Brenda, "Thank you. And in a couple of days, I'll need your help again. I need to gather them all at home." Brenda replied, "Got it. Preparing for the final boss fight?" Alara looked at the envelope with the documents. No, not a fight, just the final chord. That night, she slept more soundly than ever. She didn't dream of screams, slaps, or Julian's icy messages. She dreamed she was washing a huge, transparent window, and pure light was pouring through it. But in Julian's condo, the night was just beginning. Carol's blood pressure spiked. She moaned that she